I would like to introduce Tim. He's brought a team of incredible folks with him, and he's going to be introducing and talking with them. Tim, for those of you who don't know him, has a very rich background. He's been at some amazing companies, and I'm not going to go through the list. As I read through the list of companies he's been at, I was like, wow, here's an incredible leader, incredible innovator, and Ancestry, I think, is very, very lucky to have Tim. Tim, just to highlight though, before he came to Ancestry, one of the interesting points for me was he was the president and CEO of Match.com. And the thing that was interesting for me on that was he went from matching living to living to matching living to dead. Obviously a very talented person. He's the CEO and president of Ancestry.com. He has an M.B.A. from Harvard, just incredible person. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Tim onto the stage. Thank you very much.
Wow, we are incredibly excited to be here this morning. And in a minute, I'm going to have the pleasure of introducing four of my awesome colleagues that I get to spend my time with trying to figure out what we want to do at Ancestry. I first want to, again, I want to just comment and thank Family Search and the RootsTech team for this ridiculously successful conference. So, when Jay told me 2 years ago he was going to try to do this, I said, well, we'll help, we'll do what we can, but and I've told him this since then, I was a little skeptical that it would ever be this successful. So it's an awesome job, and we're here to help in the future. So our event today is a little bit different. We do not have a ton of fancy PowerPoint slides, no zombies. We do have shoes. And what we will bring, I hope, is a real candor and an informality, because I think what we decided we would love to do is, spend 50 minutes with you all talking about technology the way we talk about it inside the company. And here's how we think about technology. So let me say a couple of things before I introduce my friends here. So as most of you know, we have about 1.7 million paying subscribers around the world. And so if you add up our subscribers and the subscribers from all the other commercial companies and active participants of nonprofit or free sites, you have a couple of few million people who are actively doing genealogy. Now, I can tell you, everybody on this stage, and I'm sure everybody else in this space, and probably all of you, truly believe in deep in their bones that someday there will be tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people doing genealogy online, right? That's the thing that really keeps us motivated every day, and coming to work and trying to do new things with Ancestry. But here's the little secret, I'll tell you. It won't happen without innovation and revolutions in how we and everybody else in this space deploy technology. I've said many times that content, right, is the foundation of our business, and it is. We spent something like $21 million digitizing content last year. We're going to do more of it this year. But technology, yes, I'll do that for content. Technology is what lets us spend all that money. Technology is the thing, right, that will make the service easier for all of you, easier for new subscribers that maybe saw Who Do You Think You Are for the first time last night. And technology, not for technology's sake. Technology should, if there's one thing we say, technology should get out of the way, and it should essentially just help people make discoveries. So with that, I'm going to have the pleasure here of interrogating a couple of my colleagues with some questions, and this ought to be fun. So first, introduction, sorry. To my left Eric Schaup, our Senior Vice President of Product. Eric's job is very simple. Make the product better, make the product easier. I'll give you his mobile phone number after this. Eric joined us about 3.5 years ago. We stole him away from eBay, where he had a lot of the same charge there, make eBay easier and better. And he has held a series of really senior jobs in the internet for now 15 years. So really lucky to have Eric. Next to Eric, Scott Sorensen, our Vice President of Engineering. Scott manages the armies of engineers that actually build Ancestry.com. And he's been with us for 9 years. And before that, spent a bunch of time with blue chip companies like IBM, WordPerfect, Novell, and I guess even a couple of startups along the way, which is always a good thing. Next to Scott is Ken Shaheen. Ken is GM and SVP of our soon-to-be-launched, but we're not going to tell you anything about it, DNA business. Ken joined us just under a year ago. He is a lawyer. In fact, he teaches law at the University of Utah S.J. Quinney College of Law. He has his PhD in biochemistry, your typical genealogist. And he has spent a bunch of years working in interesting jobs in the biotech industry. And all the way down is Jonathan Young. Jonathan is our Senior Vice President of Technology Operations. Jonathan's job is also pretty simple. Keep the site running. And keep it running beautifully. Jonathan has been with us for 3 years. Before Ancestry, he spent 10 years with CNN, Time Warner, 2 years with Earthlink. And I just learned last night that he is responsible for the launch of Dilbert.com. So, yeah. So I'm going to start with Jonathan, because Jonathan is here tonight, or Jonathan is here this morning. And Jonathan basically ran the group last night that kept the site up while Who Do You Think You Are launched. So I congratulate him and thank him. But I think it's a good place to start, because I'll ask Jonathan, how did it go last night? What's it like to keep a highly trafficked website running smoothly during intense peaks of traffic like that?
Well, I think it was a great show. We were all certainly happy to be involved with it, and certainly happy to be here after a relatively successful and maybe a little bit boring night, or maybe this panel might have been a little more uncomfortable. But when something like that happens, it's such a great event for stimulating interest in family history in general, that you always want to make sure that a site like Ancestry is just ready to take advantage of that, and we're showing off as well as possible. So we really start serious prep about in October. We're beating on the existing parts of the site that we have, doing simulated load tests, preparing to monitor, getting all that stuff. It's made a little bit more difficult as some of my colleagues here to the right are spending that time creating new things to launch at the same time that, of course, we want to have ready for the same showcase, but of course we haven't had time to necessarily prove out at scale. So some of what you can do and some of what you can see here are some shots from last night of, we had a team of about 80 people who were at our offices here in Provo, as well as our San Francisco office, from the development, product, and marketing groups. Just monitoring everything. We got a ton of Chinese food. Thank you to P.F. Chang's, and thankfully no one had any ominous fortune cookies. But it actually went, the site, in my opinion, stayed up pretty well. The performance was good. We had good support from our product colleagues. Yeah.
Nothing exciting.
Yeah.
Other than watching the show.
That was us watching. And it was an exciting time. And
very good. Well, again, we're glad we're here, because we're glad the site held up to last night. So, second question, we asked a bunch of our blogger friends for some ideas for questions that they'd like to have us address. And we have one from Diane Haddad from Family Tree Magazine. And I'm going to pose this to you, Eric, with a little bit of a twist. Diane has asked, how have our strategies changed over the past couple of years to reach our audience? And so let me put this question twist this question a little bit and say, Eric, you spent a bunch of time at eBay. where you had a challenge of serving both, serious, heavy-duty users of eBay as well as the general population. And we have, and all family history websites have that same challenge. How do you build a service that serves both the serious genealogist, but also the brand new person that really doesn't know anything about it? How do we do that, and how do others do that in this space?
Yeah, so this is a challenge for any mature online service. So, as you said, at eBay, we had something analogous, right? We had advanced sellers who were doing this as a business, and we had everyone else, all the other sellers who were selling out of their garage. And the challenge was always to try to balance the needs of those two groups and ensure that we're satisfying the needs of the individual groups. So we face the same thing at Ancestry. In fact, it's not as simple as just basic versus advanced. There are a lot of people here with different motivations of why they're doing it, levels of experience, both with technology and with family history. And so we're trying to accommodate these different sets of needs. And the reality is there's no one-time solution, right? We always are trying to get better at this. I would say that we're not satisfied with where we are today. We actually talk about this as we embark on any project we go into. We talk about this very topic as like one of the first things. Who is this for and why? Right? And so we find it pretty challenging. Along the way, I think there are a couple things that we've done, both at eBay and here, that I think have been of use. Number one, you've got to understand the different groups of customers you're dealing with and what their unique needs are. We call this segmentation. Okay? Two, you've got to create teams, individuals and teams who feel like they have ownership or they're the advocates for those individual groups to make sure that those voices are being represented as we're talking about products we're developing. And that, look, sometimes you just have to build unique features for the different customer sets. And here I'll give the example of our search engine versus hinting. Our search engine, you've seen us go really deep on adding every filter, every capability that you would ever want to be able to slice and dice our collections. We've gone really deep trying to acknowledge the needs of the sophisticated, experienced genealogist. Other end of the spectrum, you have hints, which arguably is possibly a more technically challenging system to run and to have built, but it is far simpler. And it's deliberately so, just because we're trying to meet the needs of people who are just starting in family history. But both of them are trying to satisfy the same need, which is trying to create discoveries.
And again, at any point, any guys want to jump in, feel free. Ken, you are building, right? You're managing the team that is building our soon-to-be launched, but we're not going to say anything about it, DNA service. But I think it would be incredibly interesting to provide a bit of perspective from your background about what is happening today, right, with the revolution in the science of genomics. Wide open question.
Without talking about our super secret project.
Yes.
So we're really in the midst of a revolution that most people don't really quite appreciate. Let me give you some facts. So it took us 15 years and $3 billion to sequence the genome of one person. And a little over 10 years later, today, we can sequence someone in roughly a day for a little over $1,000. So that kind of magnitude of improvement in efficiency is driving all sorts of new products. And let me try to put this in perspective, right? So rather than just using sort of the dollar terms, let's look at fuel efficiency for a car, right? So if you filled up your car in the year 2000 and you could get, let's say, from here to Las Vegas on that tank of gas, if the car makers had sort of had the same fuel efficiency that we've had in DNA sequencing, you could take that same car today and drive it around the Earth 50,000 times, right? You wouldn't have to fill your tank again till like the 23rd or 24th century. Okay, so that's the kind of magnitude of improvement that we're talking about, and that clearly is going to drive all sorts of different innovations in all aspects of our lives.
So for family historians, genealogists, what does that mean?
I would say that we've done a pretty decent job of using DNA in family history, but I would say a lot of times it's been pretty modest, right? We turn to DNA sometimes when we have a problem. And I think what's going to happen is that DNA is going to turn into content. And I say that because we've been looking at 30, 40, 50 markers in one chromosome, the sex chromosome or the Y chromosome. And I think we're now embarking in an era where we can look at millions and millions of markers throughout the genome, right? Whether male or female, we can analyze all of it. And every time you pass your genes on from one generation to the next, we make about 100 errors. You shouldn't be alarmed. It's 100 errors in 6 billion, and it doesn't really do much to us. But what it is important is they're like breadcrumbs, right? It's like our ancestors have sort of left us clues of where they were in the past. And we're going to get to a point here where that content is something that we're going to be able to analyze and tell you things like, what town did they live in the past, and when did they live there, and things like that that are really going to revolutionize, I think, the way we think about DNA.
So we've, I mean, one of the things I'll ask Jonathan Scott to chime in, because as we've been, preparing for some service like this, one of the challenges is obviously the computational complexity of dealing with all of that data. You guys want to chime in with sort of some of the challenges that we and others in our field face?
Sure, I'll chime in there. We've got a test right now that will analyze 24 or 36 markers, and we're coming up with, the industry's moving so fast, we're going to soon have to analyze millions of markers, and we need to do that across hundreds of thousands of samples, and we need to do it in a way that, that allows the scientists, like the bioinformatics people that we have on our teams and on Ken's team, to pull the data at any point in time, adjust the algorithm, and then resubmit all those millions of pieces of data back through the pipeline to be reanalyzed. And because things are changing so fast, we're constantly improving those algorithms, dealing with just massive amounts of data.
Yeah. And I guess I'd also add that this is a really interesting time for it from a technology standpoint, because the challenge was 10 years ago impossible. 10 years from now, maybe trivial, but we're really at that bubble right now where there's a whole bunch of things hitting. This type of algorithm that we're talking about is very easy to sort of parallelize out. You've all, I'm sure, heard about what's happening in cloud computing and other things that allow us to throw not just bigger and bigger machines, but more and more and on-demand pools at it. And so it's an area where there's a lot of scope for creativity and engineering excellence for us or anyone working in this space that 20 years from now, your phone will do it all. So,
I'll make one more comment. I think that what's really been great is that I've got a team that we're building of, as you say, computational biologists is what we call them. These are people with PhDs in mathematics and statistics that also know a lot about DNA. And so they're developing all these great algorithms. And as I said, it takes collaboration, because we give it to Scott and Jonathan's team, and as Scott was saying, the question is, how do we take those algorithms that do these discoveries and make them run well and make them run fast so that you're not waiting months and months for the data? And so really, it's been a really collaborative project that's been going incredibly well.
I would just add, and then the goal, and then the objective has to be to present all that stuff in a way to people that's understandable, getting technology out of the way so that the value of these discoveries and the value of the content, what we can do with that content, actually means something to people. So this is a question for any of you, all of you. A year ago, at RootsTech, there was a young entrepreneur out there in one of these keynotes named Jason Butterfield, who had built a fantastic iPhone app called Traces of the Past. A couple of months after RootsTech, we bought Jason's company. And we've incorporated Jason's technology into our own mobile efforts. Jason now works for us. In fact, he runs our mobile engineering group, reporting to Scott. So the question is, as a big company, we build a lot of things. We're also looking to essentially possibly buy innovative technologies. What kinds of things are we looking for? When we think about build versus buy, what sorts of technologies or innovations? And this is maybe, this is sort of a comment to the true entrepreneur technologists in the audience. Where do we see value as a company like Ancestry?
I'd say that to me, this question is all about the fact that we don't own any sort of rights to all the great ideas in the world. In fact, the big players in this space today won't come up with all the great ideas. there's a ton of individual entrepreneurs in the audience. There's a ton of small startups that are going to just come up with some really great innovative ideas in 2012. And those are the type of ideas that are going to really drive the family history category forward and allow us to apply technology to help people to make discoveries and add the color to those discoveries that help us understand what our family history is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we embark on any new initiative, we try to evaluate whether or not we should be building this ourselves versus buying it or partnering for it. I think that over time, we've probably too often gone the build route, just thinking that we could do it better or it's easier or something like that. But I think that's increasingly changing. And I think that the main idea is, it's a time to market trade-off. Can we find someone who's done something that's really interesting, has brought us intellectual property that would be difficult to replicate, take a long time to replicate, and can we accelerate, bring new services to our customers by acquiring it rather than building it? And always, we look at not just the technology, but the team itself. Sometimes even a moderate technological discovery wed with a really fantastic team, that's an even better trade-off. Because the team, like Jason, is going to continue to pay off for you as an employee over time.
It's all about the people. So just staying on mobile for a minute and staying with you, Eric. You and I were having a conversation a week or so ago, and you shared some pretty amazing statistics about mobile usage on Ancestry.com. Which actually even surprised me. Maybe didn't surprise you. You've been a champion for mobile for a while. I would love to have you share some of those statistics for the first time publicly. But maybe more importantly, just explain, why is mobile important? What is really going to happen with family history and mobile in the future, from your perspective?
Yeah, in regards to our mobile efforts, that's the main question I get. Why? Why are you spending your time there? So let me start with some stats, and I'll tell you why I think that's important. So I think we've said publicly that we've had over 2 million downloads of our mobile applications, the vast majority of which was in the last year. The Christmas season, we saw the most downloads ever in a given period of our mobile applications. In addition, we launched the ability for people to accept record hints around Thanksgiving time of last year. Since then, we've had 2 million hints accepted via the mobile phone, which I find just astounding. Over the course of the last year, we've had 1 million photos uploaded and attached to trees. 60% of the registrants, people who register via the phone, 60% of people who download the software are registering with Ancestry for the first time. So that points to this opportunity that people who want to interact with us and want to interact with family history via the mobile device, we're just not seeing on the web. And I think the last point is to make is that if you take out the applications out of the mix and just look at mobile browsing, we've seen that on our site, we're now at 12% of all visits are from mobile devices, up from 8% just a few months ago. So I think now I'll get to the why that's important part. A couple things. Number one, this totally blows me away how much interest we've had on the part of our mobile devices. And I think this points to that people want to do family history either in part or completely on the mobile phone. And we as a community have to be getting in front of this trend. It's clear that more broadly in the technology market, mobile is the future. It is our most personal device. It's on us all the time, and you will see that increasingly our lives will all of our digital, let's put it this way, it'll be kind of the digital hub for our lives. In part, we'll do most of our things in part or completely on the phone. So look, we have to get ahead of this trend as a community. And the second point is something more tactical, which is that mobile is fantastic for building new products. And I'll tell you why. Because it's constrained, right? So this little device forces you to really think about what's most important. What do the customers really want? And why are you offering it to them? And I think that we're going to see from Ancestry, and I hope we'll see from other people in this community, that we're going to start building our new products on mobile first. Because it offers such a great way for us to get really clear about what we're trying to do for our customers, and then have that graduate to our other clients.
Great. So there's this company, there's another little company that you may have heard about called Facebook, I think. And we really couldn't get up here at a technology conference as a technology company and not at least talk a little bit about how we think Ancestry might leverage Facebook in the future. Now, there are some things like our DNA launched, specific things that we're building that we don't want to talk about too specifically. But again, we would be doing you all a disservice, I think, not to talk a little bit about how we see generally the future of family history and how Facebook might impact that, or how we might benefit from that. So again, I'll kick this one to anyone. How is Facebook important? Why is Facebook important to family historians? What is it? How's it going to help us all in the future?
I'll kick off. So look, 845 million active users a month, only 20% of whom are in the US, so massively global, right? This is Facebook. So it is a major technology trend unto itself, and something that we as family historians have to pay attention to. So even today, I guess, think about it simply. Facebook is about people. Family history is about people. There's got to be some interconnection between those two. And even in the simplest case, even today we have people on Ancestry who are actively publishing their discoveries out to Facebook. And not surprisingly, we find that when they publish discoveries there versus via email, that they get a lot more interest, a lot more traction on those discoveries when they use Facebook. So I think it just demonstrates that one of the possible uses of Facebook for us is as a sharing mechanism. I think that's obvious. Sharing of our discoveries with other people and our family, friends, and the web at large. But I have to believe there's something larger that we can collectively be doing to make use of Facebook and family history together. And I guess I don't think that we figured it out. We're certainly have some things in mind. But I guess I would challenge this community to come up with what the solution is that brings together Facebook and family history, because I really believe that it could be the thing that turns the dial from this being an interesting hobby to all of us to something that's interesting to 800 million people.
I mean, I'll jump in and just answer the question from one of my perspectives. I think genealogy, and this isn't really always the case, but I think you could say genealogy has tended to be, over the ages, a somewhat solitary, within a family, a solitary pursuit. Genealogists have always networked with each other at conferences, and genealogists have always leaned on parents and siblings and uncles to gather information. I think if there's one thing we really hope Facebook can help us with as a service, is making family history something that a family truly can do much more together. Doesn't mean that everybody around that Thanksgiving table is going to become a family historian, but it does mean maybe that quarterback champion family historian can leverage what other members of the family know, or even have a platform for sharing some of those amazing discoveries that y'all make every day with the people with whom those discoveries are equally relevant. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity to do some interesting things there. So one of y'all mentioned a minute ago, I think we were talking about mobile and Jason Butterfield and the quality of teams when we evaluate potential partnerships or acquisitions. If technology is the key to making the service, our services and other commercial services better and easier, people, right, quality engineers and intelligent people are the key to building those technologies. So, Scott or Jonathan, how many engineers do we currently have total between your groups? I mean,
not quite 300, I think.
About 300. And how many? So about 300 engineers working in Ancestry. How many are we hoping to bring on this year?
I think we're hoping to bring on about 80 engineers this year.
Okay. So how do we compete with these, cutting-edge Silicon Valley, Facebook, Zynga, Google companies, right? How do we get great engineering talent to join a genealogy company?
All technology companies are struggling to recruit great engineers. There's just not enough of them to go around. And you add to that the fact that there is a bit of a perception that genealogy is still not interesting. Of course, we can change that perception. NBC is showing that perception can be changed with the amount of people tuning into NBC and getting really excited about family history. I've found that the easiest way to get people interested in applying technology to the genealogy domain is to talk about the really challenging problems that we have to solve and the scale at which we have to solve them. Great engineers, the number one thing they want is they want to work on really challenging problems and solve really challenging problems. And it only takes about 2 minutes to describe some of the challenging problems that we face every day, and they're hooked. We face challenging problems at the same scale that Facebook and Google, face challenging problems. And so, super interesting work for technologists.
I'd also add, though, that maybe when people walk in the door, they're not necessarily genealogists. They don't align up with the profile of a typical engineer. But people really do appreciate what they're building and that they're working on something that is so important to so many people. I mean, you have a quick conversion, really quick conversion. Within a few months of somebody joining, and you talk to them about family members or other folks who really engage with their work in a way that when they're working on a back office thing, they can't articulate the value that they're bringing. And working in family history, it's just so much easier. I find it personally satisfying, and I think most of the folks on our team do as well.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, do a little bit of a show and tell. It's a technology conference. We're not going to get up here and not demo a few cool things for you all, but it ties into a question that, again, we got from one of our blogger friends, Thomas McEntee, who asked, what is Ancestry doing to keep those new to family history engaged and interested? So I'm going to ask these guys to just demo a couple of technologies that we've been working on the past year or so. They're not really highly visible on the site. One of them really isn't visible at all, but I think they're good examples of the way we're trying to use technology to create value, right? In one case, make existing content that's on our site more valuable, and in another case, make the consumption of existing content more useful and meaningful. So I don't know who's going to drive here.
He's going to click.
Okay.
So why don't we go ahead and cut over to the demo. Okay, what we're looking at here is a city directory from Albion, Pennsylvania, 1910. And we have a ton of these on our site. We have over 10 million of these images on our site, but they are not often used because they're incredibly hard to find. They're hard to search and hard to find on the site. But as you guys know, these are extremely valuable documents. This represents almost like a census for a given year in a city or a county, and could be really useful if you could just find them in helping your family history progress. So we saw that on the one side, we have this great deal of value that's not really being expressed. On the other side, our site and just the way we've made these things searchable, it's almost impossible to find. So Scott's going to talk in a second about something we've done, some technologies we've built to try to solve this problem. Actually, before I go there, I'm going to say one other thing. City directories represent a type of content. Semi-structured content. I think there's been a theme throughout the last couple of days of unstructured content and how do you make unstructured content more accessible. This is an example of semi-structured content. If you look at a city directory, you have names that are listed in alphabetical order. They start with last name, first name, and so forth. But you also notice as you look at this image that there's a great deal of variety. Some lines wrap, some of the names are bolded, some have spouses, some don't, some have occupations, some don't. It's very hard for a computer to be able to parse through that in a way that makes sense for us humans. So anyway, we're going to talk about the technology here in a second. And while we're doing that, we're going to tempt the demo gods, and we are going to be indexing this while he talks, and hopefully come back to the index and show you what we got out of it through this new process. So why don't we switch over to the slides?
Great. Let's see. We got this. There we go. Thank you. So semantic extraction is what we're going to talk about. And simple OCR simply does not do the trick because it doesn't allow us to attach any semantic meaning to the words. All we get is a bag of words, a term that is used among search technologists. And there's no meaning to these words. We don't know that one term is a name, one term is a location, one term is a date, and we don't know the relationships between people or between the terms that we discover. And so what we need to do is we need to apply a set of techniques including enhanced OCR, natural language processing, machine learning to add meaning to these terms. And what that will result in then is instead of this bag of words, we get terms that we can extract and associate meaning with. Once we have terms and we can associate meaning, we know that names are names, places are places. Then we can use classification techniques in order to determine that there's an ad in the middle of the page, for example. Throw the ad out. We can use classification to determine that this is, in fact, a city directory, and therefore we know that the names are in alphabetical order. When we do our QA technique at the end of the, our QA pass at the end of the pipeline, we can determine that something's out of order alphabetically, and so it must either have been an ad that we missed, or it might be an OCR error, or it might be line wrapping that we just didn't get correct. And so by doing this, we can create a search that is better than just a term search. And in fact, something I would say that is as important, we're able to then apply the magic of record linking in order to do the hints that will allow people to discover so many of those unique records. Since July, we've been using this technology, and we've already indexed 500 million records. And this pipeline can also be used for other types of content, including electoral rolls, obituaries, or if you replace the initial part of the pipeline, the OCR part, with a web crawl, this can be used for web search. There are billions of records out there waiting to be discovered and that are not currently accessible to genealogists today. And we think the application of this technology will allow us to find those records.
Great, so let's switch back over to the demo real quick. So again, I was tempting the demo gods to see whether or not we could actually index this document while we sat here. So I'm going to hit refresh in the hopes that it actually worked. So again, the objective was to take the semi-structured data and turn it into structured records such that we could make it searchable, hintable, findable on the site, and attachable to your tree. Okay? So here we see on the left that we've successfully created an index, and you'll see all these people were in that document. And let's go find my friend, Mr. Brower. Where is he? Samuel Brower. So we click on Samuel. We can see that we've indexed and we've provided the metadata of the document itself, that he was in 1910. He was in Albion, Pennsylvania, in the US. So what's the implication of this? So So what's the implication? So as Scott said, we've already launched 500 million of these records on the site in a beta form. So if I go to my tree and I add in Samuel T. Brower and his wife Olive, I get one of our little shaky leaves. And I click through on the shaky leaves, and I see, okay, US City Directories beta record for Samuel T. and Olive in 1910. I can click through on that. And there's the index that we just drew from that semi-structured data, now made it abundantly, thank you, abundantly findable and useful. I think this represents a way for us to bring another couple billion discoveries to our users and hopefully to the community at large. It's a great example of us using technology to add value to our customers' experience. Okay. So with that, we're going to go to the other demo. So that was the kind of behind-the-scenes data one. So now let's talk about censuses. So about 18 months ago, we did some research to find out why people were having problems getting started on the site, or how we could make it better. And they told us two things. Number one, they were having challenges with finding records that were relevant to their family. That's a well-known problem and something we all have been working on for a long time. The second was interpreting the records that they found to distill from it, well, number one, is it relevant to me? And then to distill the richness of the discovery out of it such that it could become a story for them and for their family. So we set out to try to solve this problem, and where better than with the censuses. So here I'm showing the example of the 1910 census. And if you guys can just find in here for me where Babe Ruth's record is, that would be awesome. No? Anyone? Yes, exactly. So this is the experience that we all live with today, right? That we have these duplicated records where we've scanned things, where it's hard to read the handwriting, it's hard to find the records that you're looking for. And once you do find the record, here's George right here, George Ruth. It's really hard to read through the entire document to be able to understand what's there. And so we actually did a poll. Over 80% of people said that, number one, they never made it to the right side of the census record, and two, that they felt they didn't fully understand what was there. Now, any of us in this audience know that looking at this document, there is a whole life story represented in this document, and it was really important for us to have our customers be able to see that story. So here's what we've done. So you may have seen an announcement the other day about how we were launching our new interactive image experience on the 1911 census, the UK census. We're also launching it in the 1930 census shortly. So this is a preview for you guys. So here we see, again, Babe Ruth, but this time in the 1930 census. And what we've done, first of all, is we removed as much of the other stuff off the page as we could to enable you to focus on just the image. We want the image to feel, give you a visceral response to that record as though you were holding it yourself. Second, we highlighted Babe Ruth, or George Ruth here, and his whole family in one place. And then we've enabled you to read across the record to try to distill from it the story. So we see George Ruth. He's a son-in-law of living in the household of Carrie Merritt, must be his wife's parents. We see that he's male, 36, which means he was born in about 1894. He was born in Maryland. His parents were from Germany. And so forth and so on. So you can really give someone a really visceral sense of the story of this person's life. You may have noticed that as I was scrolling across, that the little locking rows on the side show up, so that you don't lose context as you're scrolling around, that you know the person's name, and even as you zoom in, we keep track as well. So we really think this is going to provide a step change in the interactivity and richness of these documents. Thank you. So what we wanted to do is have Scott talk a little bit about how we did this. There's another situation where we took technology and applied it in a way where we made the experience incredibly simple and tried to hide away the technology.
Exactly. Maybe we can switch back over to the slides, please. So I apologize. We'll go through these backup images in case our demo didn't come through. Never know what's going to happen with our internet connection. So historical images present some really big challenges. As you guys are all really aware, having dealt with lots of historical images, they can often be faded, worn, even torn, half a page missing. You've got skew to deal with. And so the challenge is, how do we detect the lines so that we can know where the rows and columns are? And so we've come up with some sophisticated image processing technology to be able to find those rows and columns, and then we can associate all the metadata with each cell in that record that will allow us to then provide this experience. So lots of companies are spending time and effort making sure that we can acquire great records, billions of records, and lots of companies out there are working hard to make sure that those records are discoverable, that we can find those records. What we want to do is go a step beyond that and leverage technology to make sure that when you do make that discovery, you can get all the value out of that record. You can really uncover the story that that record has to tell. So you each are familiar with the experience of making a record discovery. Well, we want to make that discovery even more meaningful and more powerful by uncovering the story that that record has to tell.
We're just getting started. Okay, what you see out on the 1911 census is kind of our 1.0, and we have a bunch more planned, both improving on the census experience further along these lines, but also applying the same techniques to other content sets. So be looking for that. Thank you.
So look, if I were to sum up what we're trying to show there is, clearly those are examples of technology. It's like there's some really sophisticated stuff behind the scenes that we hope make the service better and the service easier. And if there's a general theme, I'd say it's not just Ancestry that's making incredible investments and incredible innovations in family history. All of our commercial competitors and all of the nonprofit groups are really making innovations today at a faster pace than at any pace I've seen, in the years that I've been associated with it. So the one thing I'd say to users, be patient with us, right? We're all trying things, and sometimes they're a little buggy, and sometimes they're in beta, but be part of the process with us. I mean, we love the feedback, and I'm sure the other folks in the space love the feedback. Tell us what doesn't work, what does work. We don't want to build things just because they're cool. We want to build things because they work and they help you. So we're trying to listen, right? And I think these are examples of technologies that I hope will frankly stay out of the way, stay out of the limelight, and just deliver a better experience. So I want to finish up with what I'll call the lightning round. And just ask my colleagues here for just short, quick answers on a couple of questions, and then we'll get off the stage. So, what is the single thing that you think will be most different about family history in 10 years? Here.
I think we will have cracked the code on handwriting recognition, bringing a ton more records, making them available to family historians.
Scott?
I think the DNA, I get to go first, Ken, so I'll still. I think the DNA is going to allow us to discover all of our distant cousins and the common ancestors.
So what I would say is I think we're also going to integrate DNA into records in a way that people may not think is immediately obvious, but the DNA is also going to help pick out who the right John Doe that you're looking for in the future, and we're working on things like that.
So I guess I'd say probably the platforms, the infrastructure will be so reliable and capable and easy to use at that point that I'll be out of a job.
Early retirement, we like to call that, not out of a job. So what's the one technology problem? We'll start with you, Jonathan. We'll go back this way. What's the one technology problem that you would like to see solved in family history, whether we at Ancestry solve it or somebody else solves it?
Well, we've talked about this in the past, but Eric's comment on the handwriting recognition, I don't know that I mean, that's a hard problem. If anybody's ever able to crack that, that would be amazing. I don't know that it's going to magically happen with Moore's Law and other things that in 10 years without some very interesting theoretical breakthroughs, which I hope happen. I think that would be very transformative, but I don't expect it to just happen without somebody putting a lot of sweat into it.
So I would say that everything I said about what we can do with DNA, I'm absolutely positive we can do. The computational power, right, that's going to be required to extract that content out of the DNA is just going to be a real challenge. I mean, comparing 6 billion bases against 6 billion bases a million times is not an easy math problem.
I think it's simply making a frictionless user experience. The user experience still gets in the way, and we need to make a frictionless user experience so that I can get on with the business of discovering my family history and not trying to figure out the website.
Yeah, exactly. Well, since you got applause, I'm just going to agree with you. What he said. Yes. No, I was going to say the same thing. I think that, yeah, really, I was. So I think it's about getting the technology, building blocks in place such that we can stop kind of worrying about the technology and enable people to just make discoveries in a broader-based way. Look, I think the biggest challenge for us as a group is to make this a more mass-market hobby. I'll speak for myself that I've gotten totally hooked on this, and I think that's available to all of us. But one of the critical things is creating great user experiences that are not techy, that are easy to engage with.
Okay, last question. What's the coolest thing one of our competitors or somebody in the nonprofit space, free services, has built in the last year?
I don't know if it's a competitor, more of a potential partner, I guess. So I've been really impressed by this company called 1,000 Memories. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Yeah, they deserve a clap, that's right. So I think they've done a really nice job of enabling someone to recall someone's life, and to memorialize someone, and do it in a way that is emotional and is resonant for people. It's a great example of getting technology out of the way and creating an emotional experience. It's really simple.
I think that it's a bunch of simple things that are going to make the user experience much better for all of us. And so I'll just choose something real simple, be able to use Dropbox to upload customer-contributed content.
You know, I spent a lot of my time looking at a lot of different sites, but I mean, going back to that technology question, it's the idea of we want to do some really complicated science and not present that to you, and I think a lot of companies are starting to get that idea of getting the DNA and all that science out of the way, and so all of those guys I really applaud because it's not an easy thing to do.
So I don't know that I'd call them a competitor, but you know, watching what NARA's doing with the 1940 census is definitely a game change and maybe the sign of a more active role for that sort of thing. So that's fascinating.
So let me wrap up, and I'll offer one. You know, Jay 2 days ago talked about collaboration, and I think collaboration is absolutely critical. No one innovates in the scientific community or in the technology community alone. But I'll say, like, one of the great things about having a commercial space for you all is competition. Because I'll note that this group of people and everybody in our company is watching what startups and our competitors are doing in this space every day. And I'll tell you, it's what keeps us energized and focused on really coming to work and trying to come up with our own great ideas. So I think we have a fantastic era underway right now in family history. There's rising interest. There is a real space and an ecosystem of well-established companies that are making money. Company or entities like Family Search and NARA that themselves are really obviously leading in many different ways. And then there are, I'm quite sure, in this audience and out in those halls, dozens or hundreds of entrepreneurs. They're going to come up with better ideas than any of us are going to come up with in the next year or two. So we're going to do our part. We're going to keep investing in technology and content, but we're going to try to get that technology out of the way and make the service better. We want to thank everybody for being very active participants with us in that. You've been great sources of ideas and great feedback, and we ask you to keep that coming. So thank you from Ancestry. Thanks for coming.